My apologies. I'm not the most in it right now, but I need to put an audio out already because it's been like, I think System Shark sent me has been kind of keeping track of our sorry little asses, and I think it's been like 33 days since I last finished an audio, so yeah, that's not cool. I apologize for that. Once again, this is the same thing that we saw a little bit early in the game. The purpose of the Naga is to play aggressively against your opponent. You can do a little bit of creeping if you have a fairly good sense that your opponent is chilling in his base at the moment. You absolutely don't want to fight him in his base, and generally you don't want a dead-on fight against his army. Check this out. Nice little surround against the Pit Lord. I'll talk about the Pit Lord in just a minute here. But notice that after he gets the surround kill, TDJ immediately town portals out. His opponent has a Naga in his army and a lot of bears that were just kind of closing in. That was going to do a hell of a lot of damage, so that was a very, very smart town portal by TDJ. Now let's talk for any Night Elf players that are watching this. Size pick of the Pit Lord third. I think that is actually a very, very good choice. Some people may wonder why he didn't go for the Panda, because the Panda just like owns everything. Ghouls, fiends, not really abominations, and obviously not destroyers, but here's the deal. In the late game, the whole strength of the DK Naga strategy is really the ability to just ream his heroes. And the Pit Lord obviously has the advantage that he can't be nuked by coil. So that makes he's a little bit more survivable than the Panda. So I believe that is why Sai picked him, and that was a very good choice. Now this battle up here, this is great. It's a creep check, but this is going to go pretty badly for Sai here. Or for TDJ here. Sai actually was just really smart about his positioning here, and he managed to pick off like I think 2 or 3 ghouls, and only lose like 1 archer in the process. It was a fairly minor thing all in all, but if there's anything to be learned from it, it's generally not a good idea when you're charging into your opponent. You don't want to have your ghouls out in front, and this applies in a lot of cases. I mean, in general, they're a very flimsy but high damage unit. So your opponent has everything to gain and nothing to lose by killing them as quickly as possible. A lot of the times, I will actually keep my ghouls, like especially in the later game, in a separate control group. That allows me to do 2 things. One, I can very easily just hit that control group number and run my ghouls out of there. Like if there's a whole lot of AoE going off, and I know like about all my ghouls are basically, if my opponent gets 1 more breath of fire off or something, like all my ghouls are going to die, I can very easily just grab that control group and run them back to my base and get them out of the battle. And also, just when I'm moving across the map, it lets me kind of keep my ghouls in the back of my army, because being a very fast unit, they tend to stick out in front, which just gets them killed. So yeah, anyway, it is still ultimately a fairly minor point, but just kind of a good thing to know about. Let's see. Talk a little bit about creeping. In general, like on this map, you don't want to creep the big corner camps with those ogre lords until ideally you have destroyers, but at the very least, you're going to need like an orb and frenzied ghouls and stuff like that. So that's really... You can afford to creep a little bit more at tier 3, because you've got frenzied ghouls and a lich with an orb on it, you're quite a bit stronger. Now, the following battle is also not going to go very well for TDJ. He's got a good position in the sense that he's creep jacking his opponent just in the time that he's in the middle of a bunch of big creeps. However, I think it would have been a lot better for him at this point. You see, he's really kind of he gets a little bit busted up from the Rain of Fire, even though it's only level 1, because he's kind of stuck in that choke point. But he ends up losing about as much as he kills in this fight, just about. And the other problem is that he doesn't have any statues left, He doesn't have a town portal because he popped that earlier and didn't have the money to afford another one, which is fine because at the time he doesn't really need a town portal. He's got probably the stronger army in the game, so he's the one that's wanting to play aggressively. But it really would have been better if he had just gone and canceled that expansion. Expansions, if you're using this strategy, are trouble. Because when you go for Gargs, the difference is that even if your opponent gets an expansion up, which he hopefully doesn't, but even if he does, you have the ability to really screw his lumber over, and that prevents him from actually making use of the extra gold that he's harvesting from his expansions. In the case of when you go DK Naga and go fast tier 3, because DK Naga, the whole point really is to not go Garg so that you can put enough pressure on him without the Gargs to stop him from expanding at all. So I really think it would have been better, is ultimately what I'm getting at. This would be a less close game. Right now it looks like the Night Elf has kind of come back a bit despite TDJ's strong early game. If TDJ had just gone and canceled the expansion instead of going for the Creepjack in that case. But, hindsight is always 20/20. I'm sure if I was the one playing, I would have completely spazzed out and lost the game by now. So, can't expect perfection. Okay, let's see. Let's talk about shopping lists for when you're going to have a big fight with abominations, and kind of the undead tier 3 army. For one thing, you don't need heal scrolls. You are probably going to bring your ghouls along. Like I said, that's when I kind of put them in a separate group and just kind of keep them in the back when I'm engaging in the initial battle. And every once in a while, kind of check up on their health. And when they look like they're all about to die, I try and run them back. I mean, usually a couple will die, but I'll get 3 away, and they'll be able to keep collecting lumber for the rest of the game. Ideally, you want to get... I don't think TDJ had enough money left to do this, and he's only got about 4 ape. He's got 5 of them. Okay, number 1, you have to get Disease Cloud, especially if you're going for meat wagons. The meat wagons are to deal damage to the Dryads. Fiends can kind of accomplish the same purpose, but not quite as well. Even though wagons are actually a little bit more flimsy, the fact that they can fire from such a range and the fact that they have the Disease Cloud makes them quite a bit more effective than against Dryads than Fiends. Fiends tend to get owned by bears and your opponent's heroes and things like that. So basically, you've got to get Disease Cloud. Ideally, you want 1 armor upgrade at least. They really help the A-bombs last quite a bit longer against Dryads. Level 5 DK is nice, but not necessary. Actually, yeah, it looks like T did get a scroll of healing. I don't think that's totally necessary, because those ghouls aren't going to last very long anyway, but what the hell. Right now, he sees his opponent's army there. Sai's not particularly interested in fighting him because he just wants to make sure that his expansion goes up. So if he can avoid a fight at this point, he's totally fine. The reason TDJ is delaying by a little bit is because he's waiting for his ziggurat to come up. It's as simple as that. He knows his opponent's got bears, so he wants to get about 3 destroyers up. I strongly caution you against building more than 3 destroyers against an opponent, even if they have gone mass freaking bears. The problem is say you kill all the bears off with your destroyers, he's just going to come back with a shitload of Dryads, and you're going to have so much money pumped into the destroyers that you're going to have trouble counting them. Pump the extra money instead. Just get more A-bombs. It's really not necessary to build more than 3, 4 tops destroyers against an opponent that's using bears. Now, as they fight, TDJ was fortunately able to just kind of kill his opponent's expansion. Fortunately, this army can do that pretty quickly. First order of battle is to kill off the bears. Bears do a ton of damage. You really can't force kills on Dryads because you can't nuke them, whereas you can nuke the absolute ever-living crap out of bears. And second order of battle, once you take down the bears, or kind of while you're doing it, is to be fairly careful with your destroyers. They actually can die pretty quickly to Dryad focus fire. As long as you play the position game, you're usually okay, because the Dryads can't really afford to go running through your abominations at this point. But just be aware that if your destroyers are up, in fact, TDJ just lost one, you got to be careful with the things. Otherwise, with like the quill beasts and the dryads and everything, that they're going to take a reasonable amount of damage. So yeah, keep your destroyers kind of in the back.